Hello, and welcome to My Week in Baseball. I'm your host, Phil Estruth Harrison. You're listening to Season 4, Episode 2. All episodes are available in both video and podcast format at myweekinbaseball.com or subscribe on YouTube at My Week in Baseball. As always, a couple of acknowledgments. First to Rose Petal Studios for the artwork and logos created for this show. To view more, visit rosepetalstudios.com. And second, thanks to Ari Estruth in Nashville for our intro music. Well, today we've got shaking off signs from Buster Posey, and was that a good idea? Justin Verlander's new home, a zero starting pitcher strategy for fantasy baseball, more on automated balls and strikes, otherwise known as ABS, and a San Francisco high school star who made it big in another city. Of course, we'll also have a blast from the past and a timely Blimerick, our baseball limerick, along the way. So let's get right to it. Okay, we'll start with a trivia question today, and that is, what 1940s American League star with a career batting average of .325 went to high school in San Francisco? Clue, he later married a Hollywood starlet in that same city. Well, this might be an easy one for you, but we will have the answer later in the broadcast. Next up, so credit for this story goes to Mark from Dylan's Tours in San Francisco, and I will highly recommend Dylan's Tours, and especially Driver Mark, if you are in the San Francisco area. They do a great job of showing you around the city. And this story is of one-time Giants star catcher Buster Posey, and currently he's the president of baseball operations for the San Francisco Giants. Posey was once shaken off by a particular pitcher, and it turned out just right. This happened when? In the 2012 World Series. So let me set the scene for you. The reliever was Sergio Romo of the Giants, and though he technically was not the regular season closer that year, he was the closer during the 2012 World Series. And what's going on in this game? Well, it's extra innings now, and Miguel Cabrera had already homered earlier in this game for the Tigers. The Giants are clinging to a one-run lead. If they get Cabrera out, the Giants win the World Series. Sergio Romo has thrown several consecutive sliders to Miguel Cabrera, and Buster Posey calls for yet another. But what happens? One of the few times in his career, Romo shakes off Posey. He doesn't want the slider. What does he do? He goes with a fastball, and he catches him looking to strike out the Tigers' best hitter, Cabrera, on the outside corner. And later, Miggy said he was sitting on a slider and planned to crush the very next one. So it turned out right for the Giants. It turned out to be a good time to shake off Buster Posey, probably one of the few times that ever happened. And to me, hearing this from our driver in San Francisco, it was great to get this perspective from a Giants fan, having grown up myself as a Tigers fan. So I always have thought of that episode from the other side. Really nice to get a different perspective. And now in 2025, the San Francisco Giants are the new home of a Tiger who pitched against them in that same series, the new home of Justin Verlander. So Verlander is an interesting case, as he will be 42 years old in this season, 2025, and he is really close to 300 wins. Now, he may be one of the few pitchers who will ever hit 300 again, or even has a chance, if he indeed is able to do it. He is just 38 wins away from that grand total. And that would be, 3 years or so of winning about 13 games a season. That would give him 39. That would put him over the top. Could he do it? Well, he did win 13 games in 2023, but due to injuries, he had an off season last year. And for his career, over a 162 game season, he does average 17 wins. That is actually amazing. I don't know. I am very hopeful that he can do it. I think if he can stay healthy, he doesn't have to pitch great. He has to pitch reasonably well, and I think he can. I think he's lost a little bit of speed, but he's going to be a little better in knowledge about where to put the ball, how to outthink the batters. So he could certainly do it, and I would love to see it happen. And if he happened to do it in a Giants uniform, terrific. I'm hopeful to get a chance to see him this year as he is now on the West Coast. So that being said, it leads us into perfect timing for today's Blimerick, our baseball limerick that we have every episode. And this time, it's a quest to Verlander and his pursuit of the elusive number of wins. So here we go. Can he win 300 games? While batters he still has to tame. With more pitches off speed on his fastball, they'll feed. 38 more, a Hall of Famer will name. So one other Giants player that I would like to point out that I'm particularly interested in for this year is their center fielder, Jung Hoo Lee, who will be just age 27. He came over from the Korean leagues a year ago. If you're a Giants fan, you'll certainly remember. And it was one of the most abbreviated beginnings to a career you'll ever see. He played a handful of games. I think it was less than 10 games. And he got injured right away. He was out for the rest of the season. Very disappointing. He was terrific overseas, though. He had a career batting average in 7 seasons in Korea of 340, and a career on-base percentage of 407. Now, I'm sure those numbers will not translate the same in the majors, but I think he's going to be better than expected. His projections for the year are very, very modest, very, very meager, and I think he's going to outperform those. So he's somebody I want to keep an eye on, and if you're a Giants fan, I think you will too. Next up, fantasy baseball and a new strategy I hadn't heard of before. So this is called the zero starting pitcher strategy, and I'm getting this information from writer Michael Salfino of The Athletic. If you do not already subscribe to The Athletic, I have highly recommended it before, and I just continue to do so. They have some of the best writing around on all sports in general. You don't have to be a baseball fan, but I think particularly about baseball. Anyway, this strategy, the zero starting pitcher strategy, and it really isn't, as I read it, it really isn't a zero pitcher strategy. It's more like a wait and see pitcher strategy. The idea is that if you're a fantasy baseball player in the early rounds, that you don't pick a starting pitcher in the first 5 rounds. So that means you're picking hitters only. And you would look more into the middle and late rounds to find bargains. It's interesting to think about. The reasoning behind this is, according to Salfino, pitching is more unpredictable, which I think is true, and injuries are more likely than they are with hitters. So if you use a top pick, a first or second round pick, you really need to get a lot of return from that player. That player needs to do well for you, and you're more likely to have that happen with a hitter. And I'm in general agreement with that concept. Another thing he puts forth is that starting pitchers pitch less, pitch fewer innings. Now that's true. There are far fewer pitchers who are throwing complete games, of course. We haven't seen that much in a while. But even going 6 innings or 7 innings, it doesn't happen that much anymore. So the workload is curtailed. You also see nobody ever does a 4-man pitching rotation anymore. A lot of teams are still doing 5-man, but there are more and more teams that are either officially doing a 6-man rotation, I would say like the Dodgers, or maybe unofficially doing so just because they have so many starters and they're trying to limit innings on maybe some of the older players and maybe some of the rookies coming up or people who have had injuries. So there's certainly truth to that, that pitchers have been pitching less. And I think the idea there is that because they're pitching less, they'll have a lower impact on your fantasy outcomes. Maybe. I think my general thought is that this may work better in a traditional kind of roto style league and a 5x5 league where you're using categories to create your standings. I happen to play in a points league, and we have recently cut back on the number of starts we allow in a week. So I think with their less innings pitched, in our league, for example, we have fewer starts. So it is true that starting pitchers, I believe, contribute less to your point total or maybe less overall to your weekly value. But the thing is that each time they do pitch, they have a greater impact. So let's say you had 10 starts in a week that you were allowed. Well, then every start would be worth 1/10 of your pitching for the week. If you cut back on that, say, for example, our league, we've cut back to 9 pitchers. So now that starting pitcher has 1/9 of an impact. They actually have a higher impact on your overall, how well your team does for the week than they did before, even though the total points that pitchers generate are fewer. So anyway, in points leagues, starting pitchers tend to dominate the leagues where the differences vary between the very best and the worst are quite noticeable, and less so generally than hitters. I do think if you're a fantasy baseball player, though, you'll want to read this article. So I would take a quick search for this. It's the Zero Starting Pitcher Strategy. Again, the article by Michael Salfino of The Athletic. Next up, more on the automated balls and strikes or ABS system. I sometimes refer to as robo-umps, or you might talk about it as a robo strike zone. So if you've been listening to this, in the last episode, Season 4, Episode 1, I talked quite a bit about the automated ball and strike zone. It is being trialed right now in the spring training games, this season 2025. We don't expect to see it in the majors at least until next year. So in my opinion, that's probably likely since Major League Baseball has the majority of votes to choose when to implement new rules. So we might see it as soon as next season. One of the things in my previous episode, I had questioned whether the robo strike zone was a 2-dimensional or a 3-dimensional strike zone. Well, we now have the answer. I mean, you know that the plate itself is 3-dimensional, but what about the strike zone? Well, from my reading, it was originally designed to be a 3-dimensional strike zone, but after much testing, and this has been run through the minor leagues, and we're seeing still in testing, but it was found to be more accurate when it was done in 2 dimensions. So the way it is currently set up, the pitch must cross the zone exactly in the middle of the plate. So the plate is 17 inches deep. That's from the flat front edge of the plate all the way to the back where it kind of triangles back into a point closer to the hitter. And so halfway is exactly 8.5 inches. So this 2-dimensional plane is not at the very front of the plate. It's at the halfway point. So my understanding is if the ball hits the corner, say at the front of the plate, but crosses out of the strike zone before getting to that halfway point, it would be a ball. It would be a ball. So if it sneaks in, and to me, that's probably most likely to happen on a pitch that has a lot of side-to-side movement. I would think like a slider or any ball coming across the plate might tick the edge. And in my view, anyway, a human umpire might see that as a strike, especially if you have a catcher with good pitch framing who can bring that ball back in to make it look like it's in the zone. But with an ABS system, that ball is going to have to cross the plate halfway back. So it's a little bit different. And that's one of the aspects to consider. The next aspect, something I think I've mentioned before, each team right now is getting 2 challenges. That challenge can be made by the batter, the pitcher, or the catcher, and it must be called immediately. And one way of signaling that, at least, is by touching your cap. I have heard that some teams are telling the pitchers not to call it. Don't call it. You're pitching, you're up there, you think you threw a strike. You're also usually coming off the mound at a little bit of an angle. You're not seeing it maybe the way a camera would, certainly not the way ABS would. The teams are really wanting the catcher to call it because their feeling is the catcher's going to have a better idea if that ball really did come across the zone or not. But a pitcher is allowed. So you might get in trouble with your team for doing so, especially if you happen to get it wrong. Anyway, so it's 2 official challenges, but the interesting thing is that really it's an unlimited number of challenges as long as you're correct every time. If you challenge and you get it right, your team gets it right, you don't lose the challenge, and the challenges just keep on going. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing, I think there could be unintended consequences, and I've heard some talk about this. Will the strike zone actually be shown on the screen anymore? You know, we're used to seeing, if you watch it on television or on MLB.com, you'll get the little box drawn around the strike zone. And so that may either change or go away. One of the thoughts is, at least in the stadium, they don't really want fans to see that box because they don't want people yelling out challenge or having any undue influence on whether the hitter, the catcher, or the pitcher ultimately calls for the challenge. I think they're also not wanting people in the dugout to be able to easily see what they think may or may not be a strike zone. I also heard, though, that in a sense it doesn't matter. It's your perception, because what you see on the television is not the same box that the ABS uses, which is in the middle of the zone. You're probably seeing the box more in the front of the zone. And so those close calls that you think might be a strike when you're watching the game might not actually be a strike for ABS. So it'll be interesting to see, does that adjust? Do they stop showing it? Is it really just in-house in the stadium they stop showing it? Because I think we're going to miss that, not seeing that box on the replays and on television. Anyway, that's another possible unintended consequence. And one thing that a quote that I heard recently from someone that I think a lot of players respect, certainly a long-time starting pitcher who has won a World Series, who has won the Cy Young Award more than once, and now with the Blue Jays is starting pitcher Max Scherzer. And Scherzer is, I would say, he's not a fan. So a couple of quotes from Scherzer, and I like these. One of his quotes is, "We're humans. Can we just be judged by humans? I'm a little skeptical on this." Which, of course, is true. And another one, I think this is very thoughtful, and I think Scherzer is very good at kind of analyzing and thinking things through. But another quote from Max is, "So what are we actually changing here? We know there are going to be strikes that are changed to balls and balls that are changed to strikes. So we're going to basically be even. So how are we actually going to improve the game?" I think that's a great thing to think about. Is the game better because of this? I guess you could say an individual call is more accurate, but it's an interesting thing to think about. It's another thing to me that we always say we want to shorten the game, and then we do things like this. We have replay, we wait for 5 minutes while somebody in New York tries to go and tell us whether or not the call was right or not. And now we're doing this. These things do slow down the game. I know in the minors, the average was very low. I think it was something like 20 seconds. It was a very minimal difference in the length of the game, but still, here we say we want to shorten the game. Anyway, next up, our blast from the past, and this time it's a team, and we're going to go back to that World Series team, but this time take a point of view I don't normally take, this time from the opposing team, in my view, the 2012 San Francisco Giants. I know I have a lot of Giants fans who listen to this broadcast, so here we go. So just a quick reminder on what that 2012 Giants team did. This is one of those teams that was winning every 2 years, every even numbered years. The Giants were winning the World Series. It was an amazing time to be a Giants fan. And in this season, 2012, they finished with a record of 94 wins, 68 losses. They were first in the NL West. Great to see. They did win the World Series 4-0 over my Detroit Tigers. Sorry to say that. They beat the Cardinals in the NLCS, and they won the division series over the Cincinnati Reds. The manager was, of course, Bruce Bochy. So a few of the players from that time, we mentioned Buster Posey, the catcher. He was absolutely terrific. He led the league in hitting that year, batting title with a .336 average. And an OPS plus also was leading the league of 171, so 71% better than average offensively. Brandon Belt was the first baseman. Ryan Theriot is listed as the second baseman. Brandon Crawford, of course, the longtime Giants shortstop, was in the middle infield at that time. Pablo Sandoval, Panda, was playing third base, had a solid season for them, 283 batting average and 23% above league average overall. Melky Cabrera in the outfield, Angel Pagan, and of course Hunter Pence. And they had other players you'll probably remember pretty good. I remember Gregor Blanco, who played quite a bit that year and was a solid contributor, .333 on base percentage. You'll probably have some other favorites that you liked as well. Just some memories there. If we take a quick look at the starting pitching, and this is so impressive, especially it really wasn't that long ago. What are we in the 2025 season? I'm talking about the 2012 season, 13 seasons ago. But the starting pitching was amazing. All 5 of these guys had at least 180 innings pitched, and 2 of them broke 200 innings that year. And the number of starts, amazing too. All of them, all of the guys I'm about to mention started at least 31 games. This was a true 5-person rotation, 5 starting pitchers. Matt Cain, 16-5, 2.79 ERA. And I know wins, losses don't mean what they used to, but still it's impressive. He had 2 complete games, which really, given more modern standards, isn't too bad. Madison Bumgarner, terrific, 16-11, 3.37 ERA, 32 starts. He also had 2 complete games and pitched over 200 innings. Ryan Vogelsong, he was 14-9, 3.37, 189 innings. And Tim Lincecum, 10-15, actually had a losing record, and strangely enough, 15 losses, led the league in losses, but he pitched enough to do that. He did not have a great ERA, 5.18, but he still pitched over 180 innings, so he was an innings eater. He started 33 games. You know, his FIP, fielding independent pitching, was 4.17, so a full run below his actual ERA. So I think you'd say he got a bit unlucky there, but he sure helped the team in throwing those innings. And then Barry Zito, he along with Bumgarner, the 2 lefties in the rotation, Barry Zito was 15-8, 4.15 ERA. He had 1 complete game. Still really great. You're talking about 10 wins for Lincecum, 14 for Vogelsong, 15 for Zito, 16 for Bumgarner, and 16 for Matt Cain. So really a terrific starting staff. And then a quick look at the bullpen. So Sergio Romo, the player that we were talking about, closing out those games in the World Series, he had 14 saves during the regular year. Their actual closer, though, really was Santiago Casilla. He was 7-6 with a 2.84 ERA. He had 25 saves. Romo actually had a better ERA, 1.79, and he had 14 saves. So some good arms out of the bullpen. Jeremy Affeldt, Clay Hensley, Javier Lopez. So some of the other guys that, if you're a Giants fan, you may remember from that time period. So that's our quick blast from the past on the 2012 San Francisco Giants. And that leaves us to our trivia answer today. And we'll remind you of the question, what 1940s American League star with a career batting average of .325 went to high school in San Francisco? And the clue, he later married a Hollywood starlet in that same city. The answer, of course, Joe DiMaggio. And the starlet, Marilyn Monroe. And one thing that I found interesting and that I learned on my recent tour of San Francisco was that they were actually married at City Hall, but they had their photos taken in front of St. Peter and Paul Church. And that is because both of them had been divorced and they could not officially be married in the church, but they took the pictures in front of the doors of the church, and those were the photos that were released and shown to the world. So it certainly appeared that they had been married there. It's a beautiful church, at least from the outside. And I did not know that Joe DiMaggio had grown up in San Francisco. A fun thing to learn about, a great baseball connection to a great city. So that's all for today, my friends. Join us next time because honestly, what can be better than talking baseball? As always, I'm your host, Phil S. Truth Harrison. We'll see you next time on My Week in Baseball.